Welcome to Voices of Tech and Litigation with your host, Ray Beken. This podcast will broaden your knowledge in the use of technology in business and our everyday world. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, chorusconsulting.net. Now here's the host of Voices of Tech and Litigation, Ray Beken.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining again. I've got a guest today that I've known for a very long time. John Fanning is a third party and risk and compliance specialist with Dun Bradstreet. I've actually known John since college. We did a door-to-door book sales deal together when we were back in college. Still the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So we have a little bit of a camaraderie there. We kind of got reacquainted. Oh gosh, probably 7-8 years ago at an organization called Gerber, the Greater Houston Business Ethics Roundtable. Very focused on ethics and compliance in the business world. I happen to be the treasurer, and John is the director of.
Defense coordinator.
Program coordinator. So he puts together our CLE programs and our networking stuff and that kind of thing. So we work very hard in that organization as well. Again, I'm Ray with Chorus Consulting, and we talk tech here. We talk tech, we talk litigation, and the compliance world is very complicated, and it overlaps HR, it overlaps litigation and just ethics and all that sort of thing, internal investigations. And John's here as an expert in that field. And I guess the first thing I'm going to do is ask John to introduce himself, talk a little bit about his journey to Dun Bradstreet, and then kind of how tech plays a role. I'll let you start, John. Go for it.
Great. Thanks, Ray. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I am. My title is Third Party Risk and Compliance Specialist. I've been with Dun Bradstreet in this role for a little over 3 years now. I have been in this industry for almost 30 years. I got started with LexisNexis years ago, and when they had their government GCL department, and about the time the Enron and the Sarbanes-Oxley started happening, more and more people were looking at understanding the companies they were working with, making sure that they were complying with the legal expectations and regulatory requirements. And part of that was doing due diligence, and it became a very hot topic. I've also worked with Thomson Reuters. I worked with Kroll Compliance, and then another deep dive compliance company called Integrity Risk, which was a spinoff of the Kroll group. And then I had my own business for a little bit in this space, advising clients and recommending different tools and solutions. And then I got introduced to Dun Bradstreet. Wasn't real interested in the job, didn't know a whole lot about their role in compliance. But as I interviewed and learned more about, their capabilities, there's some things that they do really well, and I can get into that a little later. And I joined up with the team and have been here for the last 3 years.
Okay, cool. Well, a buzzword in pretty much every facet of tech is AI. How is AI and the newest waves of artificial intelligence affecting and helping or hurting what you guys are doing in the compliance and ethics world?
Yeah, it's been really a benefit to us, and I think a good way to kind of start things off is maybe to explain a little bit about the history of Dun Bradstreet.
Sure.
We're a 180-year-old company. Abraham Lincoln essentially worked for us. So that was another thing that was appealing about this. Not because I have political ambitions, but because, it's nice to be with a company that has a long track record. But started off gathering information on companies, making sure that they were brick and mortar, making sure that they had operating, capital and things like that. And Abraham Lincoln and others at that time would go out and actually go into the field and visually assess the operations of these companies. And then we would publish a big book that bankers and other financiers in New York would buy to understand the nature of the business and understand the viability of the company. As that progressed over time, we've developed relationships with suppliers, and we get trade data. So we're able to collect a tremendous amount of information. We are a credit reporting agency, so we do give credit scores. So a lot of our customers will use us for client engagements to understand what their credit worthiness is of their customers. And then on my side, working with supply and compliance, we take a look at the company and understand their business and look at some pretty complex algorithms to see if they are going to be a viable organization, if they're going to be able to perform over the next 3, 6, 12 months. And then we have predictive analytics that we apply to that and give them scores of high, medium, and low risk. There's also the capabilities to look at things like sanctions and watch lists so that you can be compliant with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And one of the unique things about DNB is we have fantastic data, or we have probably best in class for beneficial ownership information. And so now with a lot of the things like shell companies and fraudulent organizations, that can really help to understand the structure and the ownership of the organization. And then with things like the conflicts that we have around the world and the sanctions and the fines and I guess penalties that companies receive for doing business in the wrong place, we can help what companies are owned by, say, Russian oligarchies or something like that. We also have a hierarchy table for the companies. And so all that data is wagon wheeled around the DUNS number. And so the DUNS number is one of the key components too. One of the things I experienced all throughout my career was the dilemma of false positives. And you're probably familiar with that as well, but where you'll get an alert that, hey, this company is violating the regulatory requirements. We can't do business with them. We need to check this out. You do a lot of legwork and you find out that it's not that company. It's a company with a similar name. It's a company with the same name, but in a different industry. And a lot of the time resources are allocated to determine that. And it can tie up days, weeks of time, delay the engagement with the supplier or the business that you want to do work with. And DNB can help eliminate that, because if they've got a DUNS number, we validate that is the company. And if we look at subsidiaries, the parent companies and those types of things. So a tremendous amount of data that we can provide on a company, everything centered on an identifying component being the DUNS number, and then being able to deliver that data in whatever way our customers need to consume it. One, we have user interfaces that we deliver. Two, we have API integration, and we integrate with SAP, Oracle, Coupa, all kinds of different platforms and ERP systems. We partner with a lot of different companies as well. And that way our customers can get our data into their solutions. And so that in a nutshell is what DNB does. It's complex. Data integration is complex. And with AI, what we're finding is that, we're able to take that information, and instead of having to filter it and build these complex algorithms around it, we're now able to tell the AI, this is what we want the results to be. It can take the data, digest it, and then give it back to us, the answers we need, in a much shorter time period. And so that's where we're seeing the benefit to it. And we are, very rapidly applying AI to all the different mediums that we work in, all the different industries and divisions that we work in.
Okay, interesting. Well, any trends you're seeing out there now in the world of compliance and how technology fits in the fold? What do you see?
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. So we're seeing we're certainly seeing more and more interest in things like human trafficking, forced labor, and those types of concerns, especially with China. We're definitely a lot of companies are concerned about the sanctions, the watch list, the restricted parties overseas, and not doing business with them. But not only that, but looking at the supply chain. One thing that really impacted a lot of our customers and made them more aware of supply chain awareness was the COVID, and during the lockdowns, there were a lot of shipping delays, bringing products to manufacturers, therefore creating manufacturer delays, increasing the cost related to doing business. And now, one of the elements that I think D&B is unique in is that we are able to look not just at your suppliers, but we do have data on the suppliers of those suppliers all the way down to the third, sometimes fourth iteration. So we call them tiers. So the third and fourth tiers. So we're able to help map that and see where there might be issues. So a good example would be with the Russia-Ukraine sanctions over the conflict there. Aluminum is manufactured. A high percentage of it comes from Russia, and many of our manufacturers were buying it purely through Russia, and they wanted to look at their top tier suppliers and see where those suppliers might be getting their aluminum and see how they could diversify that. Mexico is another provider of aluminum, and maybe try to find alternative routes for it. And so that's one thing that we did with a lot of clients during the beginning of that conflict, was to look at their supply chain and look at the second and third tiers and see those suppliers that might be getting their product from one of those restricted areas. And a lot of times you might find customers or suppliers who were multiple suppliers. You might have multiple suppliers for your aluminum components, but ultimately their supplier was the same supplier of aluminum. So if you had a breakdown in that supply chain, you would be in trouble. And so knowing that can help them prepare for those types of areas of concern. Yeah. Also being able to look at linkage to any type of sanctioned or restricted entity, and being able to reverse engineer that and look to see where those sanctioned entities might be connected to your top tier suppliers as well. So those are a couple of examples, and we're seeing a lot more trends where people want to know that data traditionally, and in order to meet the regulatory requirements, it's only your first tiers that you want to make sure are not on those sanctioned list. But knowing that you've got exposure at the second and third tier can be very valuable, and can also drive. And I mean, you're seeing a lot more regulatory scrutiny, looking at making sure you understand those things.
Yeah, because the supply chain runs really deep. So getting all the way back to the manufacturer and all the different stages in between, I suppose, and you're using tech to track all that and make sure you keep it all updated, I'm assuming, correct?
Exactly. And like I said, we've got three different ways we deliver our data. One is through a user interface, and that's our own tool. It's called Risk Analytics. And that tool can deliver, you can manage your portfolio, you can set alerts. So if anything changes, if there's a merger, if there's an acquisition, you'll be alerted to it. If the CEO changes, CFO changes, those things can be alerted. If their scores change, and I mentioned our predictive analytics, we're looking at shipping data, we're looking at supply data, We're looking at information like trade data in order to build these predictive scores. And that information can drive variations in the scores. They can go up, they can go down. And if a company moves from medium risk to high risk, you'll get an alert, and that lets you know that within the platform. Via API, we have the same type of capabilities. A lot of companies use SAP. There's a supplier risk component to it. Our data can integrate with that. Our alerts can be monitored through that. So they can get information and get alerts through those types of systems. There's other platforms out there that have very specialized application, like spend analysis, where they will take a look at all the companies that they spend money with. Well, our hierarchy data can help and be embedded in those tools to show you how many of those companies are under the same umbrella, and then can make connections and help to get a better picture of your spend analysis. So there's a number of different applications. And I mentioned earlier all the companies I've worked with. One of I think a good analogy is kind of Microsoft and Apple. When they both came out, Apple kept their operating system was only on Apple products, but Microsoft would offer it to any computer manufacturer. Ultimately, Microsoft ended up being the operating system of choice. And with D&B, unlike a lot of the other data providers, we are very willing to sell our data in whatever format it works in. So that gives us the ability to integrate with a lot of different providers. It does make for some complexity based on technology, capabilities, resources. So we do have a lot of specialists. We have someone called a solutions architect. We have who can help, who knows all the different platforms, understands how to integrate. And that's what we see. And we see that as the future too. We think we're really, at the end of the day, a data company. We want you to use our data. Sure, our platform would be one of the preferable methods, but that's only a component of it. So it has API capabilities as well. You can ingest it into the platform, look at the data, and then deliver it out to your ERP system or whatever system you want it to integrate with.
All right, cool. Yeah. A lot going on, a lot to keep track of. It's as we alluded to earlier, it's a very complex and convoluted process of managing risk and compliance and that sort of thing. Where do you think, last question before we end, but where do you think some improvements could be made with all the complicated nature of what you do? What are some things that you see improvements?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is, that I would like to see better visibility and transparency into the supply chains, so that companies can better prepare. The government regulatory requirements, we need some clarity. We hear a lot about ESG, which is a kind of a term we hear where a lot of companies are looking for that type of data, but there's not a lot of clarity on what the regulatory requirements are going to be there. They tell them to gather the data, but they're not specific. Understanding better what the parameters are that a company needs to operate in. A lot of our customers do not have unlimited resources for compliance or legal or even supply. They see this as a cost center. However, they know that if they don't do these things, it can be incredibly expensive with the fines and if there's a shutdown in the supply chain. So being able to integrate that data throughout all the different areas of the company and being able to automate it. And I think AI is going to help with this. I think it already is. But making that as seamless as possible, as automated as possible, so that you don't have to have your people chasing down, say, the false positives and things like that waste their time. Have them be able to focus on the truly high-risk entities, and those that are low or medium risk, have those things pass right through with an automated process, with any information being tracked and audited and alerted via a monitoring system, so that it doesn't even have to be touched by human hands unless there's an issue. And I think I think we can help with that now. But I think as time moves forward and things like machine learning continues to grow, we'll be able to do that and be able to reduce the cost related to those regulatory requirements and help people just focus on doing business.
Got you. That sounds cool. Well, you want to close with anything? Any words of wisdom? Anything you're thinking about in the world of compliance before we end?
Yeah, I think a lot of compliance professionals worry more about internal operations and how to manage things internally in order to make sure their people are meeting the requirements. But most of the I guess most of the violations and things like that have come through third parties, and so it's hard to gather information and do due diligence on it. And on one side, you've got the, deep dive due diligence, which is very expensive. And then you have the minimum of just kind of screening. What I would say is that if you can incorporate your own internal information, as well as bring in good external information and find ways to automate that, you can eliminate the need to go to the deep dive, and you can build a repeatable process and hopefully be able to set that aside and protect your company from those types of risk. And D&B is a great resource for that. And so I don't mean to be a sales pitch for D&B, but I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was advantages to that methodology. Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, this has been John Fanning, again, third-party risk and compliance specialist with Dun Bradstreet. I'm Ray Beken with Chorus Consulting. We do all things tech, and we just like to talk tech when it comes to compliance and HR, forensic investigations, internal investigations, e-discovery litigation. So when it comes to the tech world, we're here to help. And with partners like John, we're partnering with folks like them all the time to improve and to better serve our clients. So with that said, I'm just going to let this be the end. I really appreciate your time. Let's get together next time you're in town.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been tuning into Voices of Tech and Litigation with your host, Ray Beken. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, chorusconsulting.net. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.